Hey, what's up everyone? Nick here. Welcome back to the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Remastered Immortal walkthrough. We're moving on to part 2. Like I mentioned in the first video, this walkthrough is going to consist of 3 videos, and each one is going to cover a different act of the game. So Act 1 was pretty quick. We were able to get through 5 chapters in 40 minutes. Partly because they're the first levels of the game, so they're shorter by nature. They're also a bit easier. Act 2 is going to have 6 levels, so you'll see that this video is quite a bit longer than the first video, and like I said, that's for a number of different reasons. One, the levels are just a bit longer, especially actually this one. This first level, Wolverines, is going to take us, I think, about 17 minutes. And then there's another level later on that is a bit longer, and it's one of those things that, like, you can't really do anything about it. Like, actually, believe it or not, this level here is one of my least favorite levels of the game. I just find it kind of boring. Basically, you get to this large, like, shopping complex, and you just go from building to building, killing enemies, and then there's, like, a couple helicopters and stuff. But it really feels like there's no objective. You're just kind of defending. Like, you're just defending the perimeter. Which, to be fair, I mean, I would assume is a pretty realistic mission for active military, but you know, compared to the other levels of the game where you're doing like slow-mo breaches and you're, you know, infiltrating oil rigs, and you're doing stealth missions like defending, you're gonna see in a second, like defending the rooftop of a burger restaurant is not quite as exciting in comparison. Regardless, we gotta do it, so we're here. And like I said, this first level is called Wolverines. You'll notice that I was just trailing behind a tank, and you got to throw a smoke grenade so that you can make your way to the alley here. Once you get to the alley, be careful, there's 2 enemies in the alley, and then there's going to be a truck that pulls up and drops a lot more off in the parking lot. So again, just take it slow. Keep creeping your way up. The biggest thing to note here is, especially like in this section specifically, you know, I talked in the last video about so the number 1 strategy is that you're playing on recruit, you know. So the Immortal trophy, you guys should know this since this is video 2, but in case you don't, the Immortal trophy is unlocked for beating every level of the game without dying and without restarting a checkpoint. Now, you don't have to do that you don't have to do that consecutively. So you don't have to do it the entire game from start to finish without dying. You just have to do each individual level piece by piece. I just happen to be playing the game in order because I'm making a walkthrough, and I felt like that was most appropriate. But anyway, given that challenge, the number 1 strategy is to play the game on recruit, which is the easiest difficulty in the game. That being said, there are still, you know, even on easy, there are still things that can kill you that sometimes are just not necessarily beyond your control, but it becomes a bit more complex than just shooting enemies. So I mentioned in the last video, grenades, RPGs, there are things that I was calling like unresponsible deaths, where you might get a teammate killed in a critical mission, and so it'll count as a death for you. So things like that can still kind of mess up your run on an individual level. And with this level in particular, specifically back in that alley, there are a lot of vehicles, because you'll notice we're in a parking lot. So you got to be careful there. You don't really want to get too close to a vehicle, because if that thing explodes, you'll either 1, you'll most likely die, or 2, you'll come within inches of death, and then like a couple stray shots from an enemy will put you down. Anyway, right here you can actually clear a lot of the enemies out before they even have a chance to get to you. So an important component of this game, and right there is a perfect example. So I'm up on the rooftop kind of minding my own business. and it looks like I got hit by some type of stray RPG. Like, to be honest, I don't even know what hit me there, but that just happens every once in a while. Like, even if you're playing on Recruit, even if you're doing everything the way you need to be doing it, sometimes you might just get hit by one stray RPG or one stray grenade, and it can mess up your run. But as you saw right there, it didn't kill me, right? So if I had been on any harder difficulty, it probably would have killed me. Now, when the second wave of enemies is storming you and you have to switch the turret to the other side, it's a little more difficult, and it's pretty likely that enemies are going to find their way onto this rooftop here. You'll notice that there's 2 access points. There's one ladder right here in the center of the roof, and then there's another one on the opposite side of that, like, AC vent or AC unit. So what I recommend doing is standing near the one in the middle and position yourself so that you're facing the other ladder so that you can kind of see both enemies at the same time if they're coming up. The first wave of enemies, it's very unlikely that they'll actually make it up to the roof because it's an easier vantage point to kill them before they can get close to the building. But for that second wave, it's just a little more difficult. Now, here comes something really important. This is going to really help your run. You'll notice that before jumping off that rooftop, I grabbed an RPG, and I made sure to grab some extra ammo for it. As soon as you can, just drop down off the roof. You're going to see 2 tanks coming down the street, and then from a reasonable distance, just boom, pop 1, and then boom, pop 2. They move slow enough, they should be easy targets. Obviously, you don't want to get too close because then they can kill you pretty easily. Another thing you want to be careful about is there are going to be enemies in the street. So just, you know, be vigilant of that, but really being on Recruit, it shouldn't matter. But on this difficulty, all it takes is 1 RPG to put one of those tanks down, and you save yourself so much trouble, because if you don't kill those tanks right then and there, they're just going to keep patrolling the streets. And like I said, in this level, we're basically going to be traversing the parking lot, going from building to building, and those tanks are just going to make your life much more complicated. So I highly recommend, again, before you jump off that previous roof, grab the RPG, grab some ammo for it, at least 1 extra rocket, and then drop down and kill the tanks first and foremost. Now, when you come into this diner, be careful. There are going to be a handful of enemies that try to sneak in through this back door. You'll hear your teammate. I don't know if you heard him there, but you'll hear your teammate yell incoming, and that's kind of your cue. But that's what I was trying to say earlier was in this game, it becomes incredibly important to pay attention to audio cues. So that was a good example where he told us incoming, but then commonly what they'll do is, you know, these maps are pretty big, and when you're given an objective like that to defend some type of objective, it can be hard sometimes to figure out which direction the enemies are going to come from, and that can often be, you know, hurtful to your playthrough, because if you can figure out where the enemies are spawning from before they even spawn, you can kill a lot of them like right when they spawn, and that'll save you a lot of effort. So something that happens in this game is your teammates will often give you a direction. They'll say enemies coming in from the north, from the south, whatever. And if you look at the very bottom of my screen, there is an active compass that's telling you the direction you're facing at all times. So that becomes a really helpful tool if you're paying attention to those audio cues.
Stack up by the south entrance of Nate's. We need to get the hell out of this building before those fast movers make another pass.
Alright, so like I said, this whole level is just, I don't know, in my mind it feels a bit tedious. Basically, you're going to go from the diner to the burger town, and you're going to clear the enemies out of the burger town, and then you're going to have to do another little defense section, and then the only thing that kind of, I don't know, the only thing that kind of throws a curveball at you is that you're going to have to deal with a helicopter. You're actually going to have to deal with 2, and so that can probably be, I don't know, that could probably be the most difficult part of this.
Be advised. We're going to move Raptor from Nate's to the Burger Town as a group.
But you'll notice that before I left the diner, I grabbed the stinger off the table. It's not, you don't have to do that, but it's helpful. It saves you a bit of time. Okay, so now you see that little objective saying protect. Basically, someone is being escorted across the parking lot. So you got to do exactly what it says. Just stand up here on the rooftop, provide cover fire. As long as you're providing cover fire, you shouldn't have to worry about them actually dying. I think the only way they actually die is if you just completely, like, ignored them and ran away from the area. But so just be careful, because that qualifies as what I introduced in the first video as an unresponsible death, right? So if you were to not protect that guy, you wouldn't actually physically die, but your teammates would, and in certain situations like that, it'll cut your run, and it'll treat it as if it is your death, so it'll still void the trophy. Alright, so now another wave of enemies is going to come out of the Taco Bell looking restaurant over there. Again, you should have seen the little indicator saying that they're coming. And by this point, again, if you're paying attention to the audio cues, you're going to hear that the Predator missiles are online. If you're not familiar with Call of Duty games, I think this is the first time we've used a Predator in this game. But the Predator missiles are just these missiles that you're basically controlling from the little laptop unit that you have. And whenever you do have access to them, they make your life a lot easier, because you can see you're basically just raining fire down on these enemies. They go through thermal vision. You can see that the enemies are highlighted in red. The Predators are another case where you have to be a bit careful, only because if used incorrectly, they can end up leading to another one of those unresponsible deaths, in the sense that you'll notice that the enemies are highlighted in red, but sometimes the enemies might be close to teammates. And if you accidentally do a Predator missile too close to a group of teammates, you're going to get the friendly fire warning, and that'll also cut your run and kind of count it as a death.
AGMs are offline.
But yeah, so the thing about this level is, like I was saying in the last video, I like to, especially on Recruit, I like to run through a lot of this and make it go as fast as possible. But this is a level where you just, to a certain extent, you can't really do that. Because a lot of the objectives that you have to do are just, they kind of come wave by wave, right? Like, you just have to defend the station and kill the enemies. There's really no way around it. So you can't really, like, speed through something like that. Anyway, here comes the first of the two helicopters. Like I said, I grabbed the Stinger when I left the diner, so I'm able to kind of kill this first helicopter as soon as it spawns. And then I'm going to make my way towards a second Stinger. So here we go. Boom. Easy as that. The Stinger should not miss. It's very rare that you'll get the lock-on cue and you'll miss. I'm not going to say it's impossible, because sometimes the game just might bug out on you, or you might come at it from a weird angle, but most of the time you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so a second helicopter is going to spawn, so this is important to know. The second helicopter is going to spawn, and you need to get another Stinger off of the rooftop of Nate's, which is the building that is currently kind of to my... I just changed direction, but it's one of the buildings in this parking lot. Now, what I tried to do, and, you know, since you're already in here, you might as well try this as well, but you're probably not going to be successful, but I guess it's worth a shot. There's an RPG in this building. So the RPG can also kill a helicopter. It's just that obviously the RPG doesn't have any type of lock-on mechanism. It's just a manual shot. So, you know, if the RPG is there, you might as well give it a try. But chances are you're probably not going to hit it. in which case, if you want to, you could just skip that altogether and just run over to Nate's before the helicopter even has a chance to spawn. Now, another thing worth noting is you have to run across the parking lot, and as you can see, there are enemies, obviously, there's the helicopter, so you do got to be careful here. So you have a couple options. You could try to clear out all the foot soldiers before making the run for it. The other thing is, remember, or unless you've used them all, you should have smoke grenades in this level, and so it's not a terrible idea to maybe pop a couple smoke grenades into the middle of the parking lot, and that'll at least cover part of your run. But all in all, you can see, again, I'm playing on Recruit. I'm not incredibly worried. I'm just going to make a run for it. I did end up throwing a smoke grenade, but that was pretty stupid on my part because I threw it way too late, so it didn't even have time to properly detonate when I needed it to. So I don't know. Do as I say, not as I do, I guess is the point there. Anyway, here's the stinger on the rooftop. There's a lot of cover up here, so you shouldn't really have to worry about the helicopter getting you. I didn't feel very confident in that shot, so I just wanted to line it up again. Then it got even worse because the helicopter went behind all the smoke. But I said, screw it, I trust the lock-on mechanism. And sure enough, it did the job. Alright, so once you get that message about the convoy, that's your cue to hightail it out of here. You could even make a run for it before you get that audio cue, but I don't know, it's not necessary. I guess it'll save you a little bit of time. But anyway, you'll see the objective marker. At this point, there shouldn't be too many enemies to worry about. You'll notice I'm also sticking to the outskirts of the parking lot. And then you're just going to run over to the vehicle, hop inside, and that will trigger the end of the level.
Overlord copies all. Good job. Out. Squad, we still got 2,000 civvies in Arcadia. If you got a family there, it's your lucky day. We're gonna go save their lives.
Alright, so now level 2, the Hornet's Nest. This is another level that I'm not particularly fond of, because we're back in the favela, right? So we're back in Brazil. If you remember, the last level of Act 1 was Takedown, and that was where we were like deep within the favela. This one's not as hard. This one is shorter. It's also, I think, a better map to be working with. There's not as many like hidden rooftops and windows and doorways that the enemies are going to be shooting you from. So strategically, this is a much better level, but it's still, I don't know, still leaves a sour taste in my mouth because of my memories from Takedown. Alright, so the main thing you want to do here is, at least for the first minute or so, just kind of hang back and pick off all of the little enemies. Because what's going to happen is, once you go up to a certain point, 2 trucks are going to spawn, and the trucks are going to have turret gunners in the beds. And so you can just kind of get a little overwhelmed if you try to take everyone on at once, especially because you're going to see where I decide to take cover. And if you have any enemies like up here in these little shacks, that can kind of make your life tough. Alright, so here we go. I'm going to move up. I'm going to hide kind of like behind this brick wall right here, and then the trucks are going to spawn. So there's the first truck. I was not able to kill the gunner immediately, So the truck will basically do a little lap around this building here. So I'm just going to stay in my spot, let it come around, and then finish the job. So there we go. Truck 1, good. Truck 2 is a lot easier. Truck 2 will basically come to a stop right when it enters the area, so you just got to peek around the corner there and take him out. And that's pretty much the biggest threat, is those 2 trucks. So now it just becomes a job of doing what we're used to, clearing out all the regular enemies, and then we can kind of push up, and our teammates will follow us. Oh, I guess I should take this opportunity to say Happy Easter to anyone watching that celebrates Easter. Easter for me is not... What am I trying to say? I didn't even know it was Easter until I looked at my phone this morning to see what time the grocery store opened, because of everything going on with the virus. I've been having to shop at a grocery store that I don't normally shop at, and I like to go as early as possible. So I looked at my phone to see what time they opened, and then it's like, oh, Google's like, oh, today's Easter, Happy Easter. I'm like, oh, had literally no idea. And it's just because, I don't know, I'm not religious, my family's not religious, so Easter has no religious significance for me. And as a kid, it was like, you know, my mom would hide the eggs in the yard and put little give us candy baskets and shit like that. So that was just growing up. That was my view of Easter. Was like it was just a day where you get free candy. It was like a pre-Halloween or something like that. Like you get candy and you get to go on a little treasure hunt for eggs. But I never had any idea. Well, I knew what it was about, but I never had any religious ties to the holiday. I just viewed it as a day to get candy, and so obviously when I grew up and candy became less important in my life, then obviously the day lost all significance for me, and especially now, given that I literally don't eat candy. Like, I can't eat candy, but 2, that also means I don't eat candy. I honestly can't tell you the last time I've had a piece of candy. Like, I legitimately can't remember. So, okay, let's get back to the gameplay. So, this part here, you gotta fight your way up this street. And this is actually a really good... So one, what I recommend doing is kind of sticking to the side buildings, because one, they provide good cover, and 2, they allow you to kind of like have a good vantage point looking down on the street. Also, your teammates are going to be making their way on the actual street itself, and so they do a good job at distracting some of the enemies, so that, like right there, you can see that I'm just kind of picking them off from the rooftops. But be careful, because you'll notice that we are actually going up this street. Like, this street is slanting downwards and we're climbing up it, and so that's actually a really useful nod to the very beginning of the game when you're in the training area and Sergeant Foley is telling you how to throw a grenade, and he says, you know, notice how grenades tend to roll on sloped surfaces, so think twice about throwing one uphill. That's a direct tie to this level here. Because one, the enemies throw a lot of grenades here that will just kind of roll right down to you. So if the thing you got to be careful about is if an enemy throws a grenade like 10 feet in front of you and you see the little indicator, you might say, oh, that's 10 feet in front of me, I don't need to worry about it, but it'll roll. It'll roll downhill, and by the time it explodes, it'll be right on you. So you have to pay attention in that regard. 2, just like Sergeant Foley warned, you might not want to be throwing grenades because they're going to roll back down. If you do throw them, then maybe, you know, overcompensate for that and throw them a bit farther than you would normally. But 3, the biggest threat comes from the fact, and this is what I mentioned earlier, you're on a street, and there are a ton of cars parked on the street. And so if you're standing next to one of those cars and a grenade goes off, that'll probably definitely kill you, because then you're looking at 2 things. Like, on Recruit difficulty, you can survive a grenade blast, and you can survive a car detonation, but you probably can't survive both at the same time. So, be careful of that. You'll notice this truck here that pulled up. It was pretty quick, but I shot the turret driver kind of like through the bush. So just, you know, make sure you know that that truck pulls up, because the truck is another thing that can kill you pretty quickly, obviously. So something I'll talk about, because a couple people asked me in the last video in the comments, basically here all you got to do is fight your way through the market, and then there's going to be a little chase sequence. The rest of this level is, I guess the market is a bit difficult, because you're in really close quarters here. So my biggest piece of advice for this section is really just take it slow. The enemies are hiding around a lot of different corners. They're hiding in all of these little merchant stands. So this part here, definitely just take it slow, to be a bit more tactical in this section. But then the final part of the level with the chase sequence, it's not really hard. The path that you have to take is very obvious. There's high, you know, you're probably not going to get lost, put it that way. So to answer some questions, I had mentioned right there, this was my fault completely. So I let that enemy get too close, and then just, it happens sometimes, like the enemy got too close to me and hit me, and I went to go shoot him, and I was out of ammo. So I had to reload, and as I got caught in that reload, he almost hit me a second time. That's just, I mean, one, that kind of demonstrates what I mentioned a second ago. You're in really close quarters here, so getting melee attacked by enemies becomes a much bigger threat. But 2, that's not really something you can, I don't know, it's not necessarily something you could plan for. Like, I just had killed 3 enemies prior. I didn't even have time to reload before that guy ambushed me, so just another reason to take it slow there. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the level. In the first video, I had mentioned a couple things. I had said, one, you know, the last trophy that I need for this game to get the platinum is to beat the game on veteran. So the trophies for that, basically you get trophies for beating every level or groupings of level on veteran, and then you get a trophy for beating the entire game on either veteran or hardened mode. But to get the platinum, you have to do veteran. So that's the only thing I have left to do for my platinum trophy. And I had toyed with the idea of doing a veteran walkthrough, and I think I'm going to. So last night I sat down and I started to record it, and I got through the first 3 levels of the game, like, really quickly. So I think I'll probably just do the whole game. I don't think it'll take me very long, and it's like, I'm going to be doing it anyway, so I might as well record it and then turn it into a walkthrough. But the biggest thing I seem to have noticed is, you know, something I had read online, and this has been kind of the trend of Call of Duty games over the years, but they have significantly lowered the difficulty of veteran. So I mentioned this in the first video, but the original Modern Warfare that came out on the 360 and the PS3, to this day, out of all the games I've ever played on the hardest difficulty, that is the hardest one by far. That has been my biggest challenge in video games, was beating that game on veteran. Modern Warfare 2, the original version, it was also, from what I remember, pretty difficult. Definitely not as difficult as the first game, but I'd be lying if I said I probably didn't throw my controller a couple times. And over the years, they've, you know, with like new Call of Duty games, like with Black Ops and World War II, basically everything after World at War, they significantly lowered the standards of veteran difficulty. I just think they made it easier because I think people were too upset saying it was too hard. And so they seem, what I was reading online was that they seem to have applied that same standard to the remasters. And so Modern Warfare 2 Remastered is apparently easier on veteran than the original version. Now, I'll return to that talking point in a moment. We're coming to the third level of Act 2 here. This is Exodus, and we're back in this little, what do they call it, Arcadia, this village, this town, neighborhood, whatever. And more or less, we're kind of doing standard military things in this level, like we're just clearing the streets of all these enemies. You're going to have to clear a couple houses. The biggest thing here is that you now have control of Honey Badger, which is this giant tank that you see on my right. And you have this designating laser tool right there. And so all you do is point that at where you want the tank to shoot, and it'll start shooting. So, the safest strategy here is to literally just hang back and let the tank do everything. But what I recommend doing is let the tank move up, kind of follow it, stay closely behind it, but not too close, and just pick off any enemies that you see to kind of make things go by a little quicker. Overall, though, guys, this level is pretty simple. You're just clearing streets and you're clearing houses, and you have the tank at your disposal. So, pretty straightforward. I think watching the gameplay will help you at any points where you're stuck. So, what I'd like to do with this level, and for those of you who are new to the channel, this is the style of commentary that I like to do. I've often referred my commentary and my walkthroughs to that of a podcast, in the sense that, the priority is to give helpful, strategic advice on how to beat the game. But sometimes that's not really needed. Like this level, it's more or less straightforward. There's not really any one tip or strategy that's going to help you here. And so during moments like that, I like to talk just in general. I like to talk about the game, about my thoughts on the game, bring up different discussion points, things like that, and give it more of an entertaining spin. And so this is where I'll spend this level talking about veteran, because that's what I was just talking about, and I'll pick your brain on it and ask you what your thoughts are. But like I said, over the years, they've definitely lowered what veteran difficulty means. It is nowhere near as hard as it used to be in the original Modern Warfare game. And they've also done it in the remasters. That was just a stray RPG that got too close to me. So again, just another one of those threats that it happens. When it happens, just get back, lay down, and let your health regenerate. I'm curious, though, what people think about that, because I have very split feelings, go back to the original Modern Warfare on veteran. To this day, if you ever watch any of those videos, specifically the channel that I like is Watch Mojo, but if you ever watch any of those videos that are top 10 channels where they just do a bunch of rankings, you could easily YouTube top 10 hardest difficulty settings of all time, or top 10 hardest achievements, or whatever. And it's pretty consistent that Modern Warfare's veteran will come up on that list as one of the hardest difficulty settings ever, or one of the hardest challenges ever, or whatever. And I've beaten it. So Modern Warfare, the original Modern Warfare on the Xbox 360, that was the first game that I ever got all of the achievements for. And that's the game that kind of started my interest in doing hardest difficulty walkthroughs, because I had no interest in playing veteran. I didn't really see the point. But once I decided that I wanted to get all the achievements, that was one of the achievements, was beating the game on veteran. So I said, well, I guess I have to. And it was there that I kind of started to develop that liking of that severe challenge that comes with hardest difficulties. But, so when I look back at that, I was in high school when that happened, and it took me a while. It took me a couple weeks probably, and I can't explain how angry I got. Like, it was so hard. That's really the only way I can describe it. It was just one of the most difficult things in video games I've ever done. And it took so much patience. It took so many instant deaths. It took everything out of me. Like, it was exhausting. But it was thrilling at the same time. And once I'd finally beaten it, you know, I understand that it's a video game and that it's for entertainment purposes and nothing more. But once I finally beat that difficulty, I did feel a huge sense of accomplishment and a big deal of satisfaction from that. And it was also amplified by the fact that it was such a rare thing to do. Most people probably didn't even try veteran, and those that did, probably only a handful of them actually stuck through with it to do it. And that's why it's one of the hardest achievements, because it's rare. People typically didn't do it. And so when I look back on it, it's like, not only did I feel this thrill and this satisfaction from doing it, but there's also a little bit of pride there, because I was able to take down this challenge that most people ended up quitting. At the same time, like I said, it was exhausting. I wasted so many hours doing it, so much anger, so much frustration. I mean, I was a mess. It was really tough. It took a lot out of me, especially given the fact that that was the first time I'd ever played the hardest difficulty for a video game. That was probably not the best introduction, but I guess it's nice knowing if I could beat that, I could beat probably anything. But the point is, it was exhausting. It took a lot out of me. And so then I try to weigh the options, and I'm like, does the satisfaction that I feel from having beaten it outweigh the frustration I went through in doing it? And I think for that specific case, the answer is yes. Especially because, you know, I was in high school. What else was I doing? You know, homework and baseball practice. That was it, you know. So it's not like I would have been doing anything else. Like, today, as a working professional, if I had wasted that much energy and effort doing something like that, I probably wouldn't feel the same way. I probably would not feel like I had spent my time wisely. But back in high school, I was fine with it. But so I'm just kind of curious. I'm curious what you guys think about the whole thing, because with them now lowering the difficulty, I mean, it makes you wonder, like, why are they doing it? Because they probably are thinking, oh, gamers nowadays are soft and don't want to go through that challenge, which I think for the most part is probably true. And so part of me likes it, because part of me says, oh, I can, you know, like with this game, I can now play through veteran without all those hours wasted and without all that frustration. I could probably get through it a lot easier now. So that part of it is nice, but then the other part of me is like, well, now it really doesn't feel like an accomplishment, you know? If they're making it easier, more and more people are going to do it, and it's not really something to brag about, you know? So, I mean, the two are obviously directly related. If you make something easy, I mean, it's obvious, but if you make something easier, more people are going to do it, therefore it becomes less rare, and therefore it becomes less of an accomplishment. Whereas if you make something really hard, you're obviously going to exhaust a lot more of your energy on it, but that means less people are going to do the same thing, and at the end of the day, you're going to be doing something that not a lot of people have done, and so it is an accomplishment. So I'm just curious. I'm just curious what you guys think about that. Do you think it's good that over the years Call of Duty has made veteran difficulty easier, or do you think it was the wrong call? Do you think they should have kept that challenge as hard as it has been and focused more on the personal accomplishment rather than appeasing most gamers? I think I'm split on it for the reasons I just mentioned. I don't think I have a definite answer to that.
Overlord, Hunter 2-1 actual. AAA has been neutralized. We're heading to 4677 Brookmere Road.
Alright guys, so from here the level's over. Once you take out those two anti-aircraft guns, you just proceed to the objective. There's no enemies. The level is basically over from here. And that will put us at halfway done with Act 2. Also, for those of you watching, whether you're new or old to the channel, I'd love to know what you think of this game and of these videos in particular. Because I've been I had a lot of fun with this game. Like, not even purely from a YouTube standpoint, but just one, like, I had genuinely forgotten how good this campaign was. I haven't played it since high school, or probably college, but I haven't played it since the original version was out. And I just genuinely forgot how good this campaign actually was. This was the game that really, like, committed me to Call of Duty during my high school and college years. Like I said, I had played the original Modern Warfare. I played that first, but I only played the campaign. I didn't play multiplayer because at the time I didn't have Xbox Live, so I only played the campaign. When Modern Warfare 2 came out, I found that as, like, a good jumping in point. Like, that was my chance to start multiplayer brand new. So when Modern Warfare 2 came out, I played the campaign, I played on Veteran, everything like that, but I also started playing the multiplayer, and I just fell in love with it. Like, I became addicted to it. And that addiction held for probably the next couple of games, and it wasn't until Black Ops 2. Once Black Ops 2 was over, that's when I started to not care anymore. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, I've been considering getting the remastered version of the first Modern Warfare because I had so much fun with this one. Now, obviously, it'd be a bit weird reversing the order like that, but if it's something you guys would like to see, I think it'd be fun to do. Also, you know, given the times that we're in with being quarantined and kind of trapped in our homes, that's when it's always in times of great stress that I've always clung to video games the most, and I think that's when my trophy hunting desires peak, because getting trophies makes you feel like you're doing something and it takes your mind off of the stresses of everyday life. And so lately I've been getting a lot more into trophy hunting, which is something I've stopped caring about over the years, but lately I've been getting back into it, and like, this was a really fun game to trophy hunt for. And I feel like the first Modern Warfare would offer that same excitement. So let me know. Let me know what you're thinking of these videos. Let me know if you'd like to see me cover Modern Warfare 1 Remastered. And if enough people are interested, or if I'm just interested in doing it myself, that'll be something that I pick up pretty soon. Alright, so we're moving to level 4 of Act 2. This is actually one of my favorite levels of the game. I think it's a very nice and diverse level. You get some cool breach sequences, you get some cool action sequences, and then you get this cool spot at the end with thermal weapons. So when you come into this area here, you actually do have to be careful. Kill this guy before you do anything, because he can be hard to see, and if he sees you, he'll alert the people in this room to kill the hostages. Anyway, here goes the breach. There's going to be an enemy right in front of you, 2 enemies to your right, an enemy in the middle, and then 2 enemies at the far right. You actually don't have to worry about those 2 enemies at the far right because your teammates will kill them, but I was fast enough and I was able to kill every enemy in the room, which I thought was kind of cool. But it is worth noting, and I'll talk more about this later when we come to it, but it is worth noting that, you know, as I was recording this run of the entire game, I died twice. There were 2 moments where I died. One was in the level cliffhanger during the snowmobile ride. The other was actually in this level at the end during that thermal section. It can actually be a little tricky. And I actually even almost died again on this recording. So you'll see what happens when I get there. Take it with a grain of salt. Maybe you'll come up with a better idea. Anyway, here goes the second breach. enemy right in front of you, and then a couple across the room. So there's another. I think I killed every enemy right there. Those breach sections are really fun, I think. Those are like my favorite parts of the game, to be honest.
Enemy radio. I think we're gonna have company, sir. Set up a plan B. Get some C4 on those bodies. Go.
Alright. So do what the game says, plant C4, and then you're gonna go ahead and retreat. It doesn't really matter where you decide to hole up here, just wherever you feel like. I'm gonna do right here where Ghost is. I'm actually gonna basically lay right on top of Ghost.
There's a patrol. Hold your fire until they're closer.
And exactly like he says, just follow the audio cues here. He'll let you know exactly when to detonate. Alright, there we go. And then go ahead and just stand up and start picking off the survivors. So for the most part, this is pretty standard. This is just normal Call of Duty firefights. I really like this map. Sorry, I just got a text on my phone and was reading it and got cut off. Oh, one thing you do want to pay attention to, though, you might hear it, but you might hear this gas leaking. There are giant gas tanks on the oil rig that I was just standing right next to one. They're huge. So do, pay attention to your surroundings. You probably don't want to be hanging out near those things because, again, if a grenade happens to come near you, it's probably going to kill you if you're standing next to one of those. Now, you'll notice that I picked up an I didn't see what it was called, AT-4 or something. It's a launcher, and they're all over the place here. So I picked one off the ground. I took a couple steps forward because that will spawn the helicopter, and then I just took a couple steps back, and boom, blow up the helicopter. Easy as that. If you miss, don't worry. There are launchers and RPGs all over the place here, so just find another one and pick it up. But the one that I picked up is kind of the first one that's like immediately there in front of you. But like they're basically littered all. Like here's another one. I was just standing on top of one. They're all over the place here. So if you happen to miss that shot, just find another one real quick. Preferably you could even come in here and do it, because then the helicopter can't hit you. But like look, I already walked over 3 of them. And look at that, there's 3 RPGs right there next to that doorway. So if you miss that first shot, I recommend just coming back in this building, finding something else, killing the foot soldiers, and then popping back out to finish off the helicopter. Ultimately, as long as you're expecting it, that shouldn't be very difficult. Yeah. Anyway, once that helicopter's down, you basically got the green light, so just keep moving up. And then from here, again, it just turns into a pretty standard Call of Duty firefight. Really not a whole lot to worry about here. A couple enemies are going to come down from that staircase. If you can even start shooting them before they have a chance to get down. It's a nice little vantage point for that. Okay, so we're getting ready to enter the thermal section, and like I was saying, this is the part where, this is one of the 2 parts during recording this entire walkthrough that I died. So one, make sure you have a thermal weapon. If you dropped yours earlier, there's a handful of them right down there at the bottom of the staircase. But as soon as you enter this area, the enemies are going to throw smoke grenades. I'm going to go ahead and look down the very center of this map and just start taking out any enemies that I see. You'll see there's a few enemies in the windows, so you might also want to take them out because they could be firing RPGs down on you. I mean, essentially what I'm going to do here, because overall what my strategy is to just run through the smoke to the other end and then kind of hole up and kill any enemies that see you. But so what I'm doing here is just minimizing my risk. So I'm kind of like thinning out the herd. I'm killing any enemies that I can before I make that run for it. Okay, so now that I feel confident, I'm going to go over to the far left side of this map. Again, you'll see a couple enemies in the windows up there, so it's a good idea to try to pick them off before you make your run for it. Although this guy's being kind of an asshole. There we go. Okay, so now I feel confident. I'm going to go to the far left side here. You're going to see a couple enemies right away. So I'm going to kill whoever I see. And then I'm going to make my run for it, alright? So there's a guy. That's Soap right there. Luckily I didn't get called for friendly fire right there. But essentially what I'm going to do is once I feel confident, I'm going to make a run for it. So I'm just going to run through the smoke and then hole up in a corner and let the enemies come to me. Okay, so here we go. Run to the corner, turn around. That guy just, somehow, I'm pretty sure that glitched. Like, he lunged at me and somehow made contact with me from like 6 feet away. So, you know, like I said, it's a risky strategy making that run for it. Normally, I don't think that will happen. But what you want to do there is just run through the smoke, turn around. When you do this breach, if you do it from the door that I just did it, go for the enemy on the left first, because he's going to charge you with a knife. So make sure you kill him. And then once the breach is done, you're good to go.
Good job, Hotel 6. Marine reinforcements are inserting now to dismantle the SAM sites. Get your team ready for phase 2 of the operation. Out. Hunter 2-2, this is Punisher Actual. Go plat secure. All EOD teams are cleared for landing.
Okay.
Roger, Punisher. Hunter 2-2 copies all. Punisher, this is Phoenix 1-1, flight of 2 F-15s en route to grid 257221 for CI mission. Requesting SITMAP over. Punisher, at all flights in vicinity of grid 255202. Local airspace is secure. I repeat, local airspace is secure. Proceed on course to target area along route November 2. Punisher, this is Hunter Actual. Hunter 2-2 is moving to secure the sand site at the southwest corner of main deck. Hunter 2-3 is proceeding towards the Derrick building to disarm the explosives. Punisher Actual to all strike teams. All SAM sites neutralized. Repeat, all SAM sites have been neutralized. Blue sky in effect. 30 seconds. Hornet 2-1, this is Chester 1-1, flight of 2 F-15s, 4 harms for the section. Stand by for SEAC, over. Solid copy, Chester. Go get 'em. Good tone, good tone. Fox 3, Fox 3. Good kill, good kill. Hornet 2-1, you're cleared all the way in. Good luck. Out. Hornet 2-1 copies. 2-2 copies all. 2-3, solid copy. Going in hot. Roger. Guns, guns, guns. 2-2-2-1. Good effect on target. All snipers, this is McTavish.
Alright, so we're now in the episode. We're now in the level, the Gulag. You're going to start on this helicopter here with a sniper rifle. You're going to see a number of enemies up here on the tower. And you're just going to kill all of them. They're firing RPGs at you. The RPGs probably, unless you just like didn't even shoot your weapon, you probably shouldn't have to worry about the RPGs, because the game obviously recognizes the fact that you're not able to move on your own right now.
I see 4 hostiles on the next tower. Hang on. Shepard
Alright, so here's where the real part of the level begins. You're going to be dropped into the center of this gulag here, and we're going to basically have to fight our way in. This level surprised me, because on veteran difficulty, I remember this being one of the harder levels of the game. But I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't know. But and again, I'm not on veteran difficulty right now. But I think I've learned a better ways to approach this level. Part of me wonders too. You know, it's interesting. I'm gonna go back to a talking point that I was mentioning earlier. Part of me wonders, like, when I look back at the original Modern Warfare and the original Modern Warfare 2 and how difficult those games were on veteran, that was back before I had a channel dedicated to playing games on the hardest setting, you know. So now, like, I've played so many games on the hardest difficulty that I feel like I've just gotten better at video games in general by doing that. And so part of me wonders, like, if I were to go back and play the original Modern Warfare on veteran, would I still find it as difficult as I used to? Or was it only difficult back then because I was so inexperienced? Like, I'm really curious. Probably not curious enough to actually test it out, but curious enough to bring up the talking point on it. So this part here is a pretty standard gunfight. Once you get that audio cue, that's when you're good to head in. Careful here, there's going to be two enemies that round that corner. And then there's going to be a few enemies down at the bottom of the stairwell here as you turn left. So you can shoot them pretty early as soon as they're making their way down the corridor. At this point, it's a pretty standard fight. There are like a couple parts of this level that become a bit more strategic in nature, but for the time being, it's pretty standard. So this is where it gets, like, I don't know the word for this. It's a little more difficult here because you can kind of see the perimeter here is arced. It's basically one big circle. So in some cases it's a little harder to shoot the enemies because you got all these metal bars everywhere and you're not really shooting in a nice straight line. You're shooting across this giant circular gap. So that actually does make it a little harder. You'll also notice the lighting. You know, it's generally darker in here than it has been in other areas of the game. And I think that, in combination with the fact that you're shooting through all these metal bars and everything, it just can be a little more disorienting. So this is definitely a part where I recommend taking it a bit more slowly. Luckily, to help you with that, you actually can't just run up as fast as you want because a lot of the doors are locked and you have to wait for your teammate to engage with the controls.
Squad, head for that armory down there. Move!
Alright, so you're going to do exactly what Soap just said. Go down to the central armory here. I'm going to keep the same gun that I started with, one of the same guns I started with, and then I'm basically just going to swap the sniper rifle for a riot shield. Oh, looks like there was a little cut in the capture card there. Sorry about that. Oh, looks like there's another one. God damn it. Alright, so while you're in this central room, the reason I recommend grabbing the riot shield Oh, come on. Why did my capture card have to mess up right here? Anyway, I hope this captured most of the gameplay, but, man, I don't know why it decided to start glitching out right here. Anyway, the reason I grabbed the riot shield is because you're going to basically have enemies shooting at you from all directions here. The riot shield will protect your back, which makes things nice for if you have your back turned to a group of enemies. And then also, if you need to, you can just hunker down in a corner and equip it, and that way you'll essentially be bulletproof for a period of time. Of course my capture card only glitched right there during like one of the more intense moments, and then it works fine afterwards. I don't know how that happens sometimes. I also recommend keeping the riot shield, because you're going to... I don't think I ever actually end up using it, to be honest, but you are going to come to this area where you have to fight your way through this, like, shower room, and it can be pretty helpful, especially because you're going to have to face off against a bunch of riot shield enemies, and I think it's just a helpful thing to have. The other thing you'll notice is the gun, the actual gun that I still have. Like I said, it's one of the 2 guns that you start with. Another reason I recommend keeping it is because it has a grenade launcher attached to it, and that's going to be really valuable when you're fighting against the riot shields. Like, you're actually going to see that if you're anticipating the riot shield enemies spawning, you can kill most of them right away. It's actually pretty easy. Okay, so as you turn left here, immediately aim, or sorry, as you turn right here, immediately aim down the hall, and you're going to see a bunch of enemies. Those enemies will all try to run into cells that are on the sides of the hallway, and then you got to be more careful, because then you got to go slowly and peek your head around every single corner. But again, if you can anticipate those enemies, you can actually kill most of them while they're still in the center of the hallway. And then I think, as you'll see, only one of them ended up escaping my shots and got into one of the cells. And so I'm just going to kind of go slow. And then you'll see he's in the next one on the right. And luckily my teammates actually killed him, which is pretty rare. But I knew he was there, so that's all that matters.
Shepard, what the hell was that? Get the Navy to cease fire!
The Navy isn't in a talking mood right now. Stand by. Bravo 6, they've agreed to stop firing for now. Keep going. I'll keep you posted. Out.
Rocket. Angle behind those pipes. I have a visual. Go, go, go!
Alright, so there's a couple enemies.
Suppressing fire.
I hope that dog barking is not getting picked up in my microphone. Maybe it is.
He's breaking from cover.
Alright, there's going to be a couple enemies down here too. You got to be careful, because you'll see right behind you are these pipes on the walls. And if the enemies start shooting those pipes too much, they'll catch fire. So just be wary of that, and try not to stand in one spot for too long. Alright, so now we're getting ready to breach into the shower rooms. There's going to be a lot going on here. So first, you're going to start off with a little slow-mo breach. Pretty easy to kill all of the enemies. Keep your gun focused on the center, because you're going to see a lot of enemies kind of conglomerate there. Now, for the most part, this section's not too difficult, because you basically have enemies on the floor, and then even the riot shield enemies aren't that hard. The thing that makes this the most difficult is you'll see these balconies on each side of me, and there are going to be quite a few enemies on those balconies. So you'll see what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of hide in this corner here, and I'm going to kill the enemies on the left-hand balcony. Alright, so I'm just kind of sitting here for a couple seconds, waiting for them to pile in. Looks clear. So now what I'll do is go to the other side of the map, look over to the right-hand side, and then do the same exact thing. And you're actually going to want to do that, like, sprinkle that in as you go. because enemies will just seem to keep spawning up there, and it's very easy for you to think you've killed them all, and then you move up too far, and then you get enemies behind you, and that's when you really fall into trouble. Now, once it looks relatively clear, that's when you're going to want to get ready to move up, and that's when you're going to trigger the spawn of the riot shield enemies. And like I said, as long as you're anticipating them, you can kill a lot of them immediately. Alright, so watch this. Equip the grenade launcher, take a couple steps up, and boom. They all just spawned right there in that doorway, and so I'm just going to kind of go to town. Just keep shooting. Looks like I only needed 3. And then exactly like I was talking about, you'll see these enemies back on the balconies trying to sneak behind me. Really annoying, but they seem to do that, so you got to be ready for it. And notice too how I'm staying in the first room. Like, I did go up far enough to trigger that second wave of enemies, but all in all, I'm still kind of staying in this first room here. And I'm going slow, which, to be fair, isn't necessarily needed, because at the end of this room is a hole in the floor that all you have to do is drop through it, and that will trigger the end of the sequence. So to be fair, I could technically just run for it right now, but this is one of those parts that I just felt it was better to be safe. Maybe it's because I don't really like this level, and I didn't want to have to replay it. I don't know. So anytime you get in a situation like that where you have like one riot shield enemy, you don't really have to waste a whole grenade launcher. A good way to kill them, one, is to either just run around and try to get behind them and shoot them in the legs, or two, throw a flashbang. And if you throw a flashbang, they'll kind of drop down to their knees in order to like recover from that. And then when they do that, it's pretty easy to shoot them. That's something I recommend doing if you only have like 1 or 2 enemies with riot shields. If you have a whole group of them, maybe avoid that. And maybe go for a grenade launcher or something.
One of them should be prisoner 627. Drop it!
So? Place?
This belongs to you, sir.
Who's so?
Alright guys, so that's basically the end of the level. From here it's just more of an action running sequence. Obviously you don't want to get too far behind from your teammates because the place is falling apart. But that's all you got to do is just follow your teammates. So anyway, for those of you who might not know much about the Modern Warfare franchise, that's kind of why I regretted playing this game before playing the first one. I wasn't expecting to cover this game, it was more spontaneous, but for those of you who don't know, let me give a little backstory. This guy that you've been following the whole game, Captain McTavish, you'll notice that I've called him Soap a couple of times. That's because that's his name. His name is Soap McTavish, and in the first Modern Warfare, you actually play as him. So in the first Modern Warfare, you actually play as Soap, and Price, the guy, Prisoner 627 that we just rescued, that was your captain in the first game, Captain Price. So in the first game, you play as Soap, Price is your captain, and then in this game, you're playing as Roach. Soap is now the captain, and we just rescued Price from the Gulag. We didn't know he was the prisoner. As you saw right there, we only just found that out. Or like Soap didn't know that. And if you happen to play the newest Call of Duty game, which is just called Modern Warfare, and it's kind of like the reboot to the Modern Warfare franchise, you'll notice that Captain Price is in that game. Now that is a reboot, so it's not necessarily part of this continuity, but it's the same guy. It's the same Captain Price. Alright, so we're now moving on to Of Their Own Accord. This is the last level in Act 2. It's a pretty quick level. What I'm going to do is basically as soon as I gain control, I'm not even going to wait for my team. I'm just going to run. I'm going to kind of stick to the left-hand side of this map. Stay in the trenches. And then, like I said, I'm going to kind of opt for the left-hand side of this path here, and I'm going to sneak up the left-hand side of the building. Alright, so as soon as Sergeant Foley gives you the okay to move up, that's when I'm going to do it. And there we go. I'm now in the building. Easy as that. Alright, so most of this level is just pretty standard Call of Duty firefighting. Not really a whole lot to discuss here. Now, something you want to pay attention to here, you see this door in front of me? You'll see an enemy kind of pop through and start blind firing through. That happens several times in this level, and also in the game in general. Whenever that happens, you just want to shoot straight through the door. And that's also another thing that they alluded to at the beginning of the game. Like in that original, in the original training section of level 1, Sergeant Foley, he says, notice too that if a target is behind weak cover like plywood or a thin metal grating, you can shoot through the cover and still kill the enemy. And I don't know, I guess it's probably not a groundbreaking thing, but I think it's pretty cool, because I mentioned it earlier how he also did that for the grenades. Like, he mentioned the grenades rolling downhill, and then that's something you actually have to account for in the level Hornet's nest that we were on. And I just think it's kind of cool that, because I think it kind of happens more often than you'd expect, that in games you'll do the tutorial, and the tutorial will teach you like all these cool little tricks where it's like, it's trying to show how, like, I don't know, it's trying to show all the different features of the game, but then it ends up being a lot of times that like those cool little features are more just part of the tutorial, and you actually don't really encounter those features in the main game. But in this case, that's not true. Like, a lot of the stuff that they mention in the tutorial is real. Like, that actually happens. And those are things that you can actually expect to see in the game.
Overlord, we're on the 5th floor, proceeding to the southwest corner. I got movement. Watch your sectors.
Alright, so we're making our way to, like he said, the southwest corner, because there's basically a group of enemies that are kind of holed up with a bunch of launchers. So we have to kill them, take over their position, and then use the launchers ourselves. And then that'll kind of clear us of our objective. Alright, so here I'm just going at a nice normal pace, checking my corners, trying to be like an actual military member instead of just a aggro gamer.
All hunter units. I have a visual on the enemy's crow's nest at the southwest corner. Move forward and clear it out. Mystic 2-1!
Alright, so here we go. We're going to clear out the room. I recommend going from the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side. I think it's easier. And then here we go, just by the window, a couple enemies grouped together, and then a couple enemies right there at the very bottom. Not very difficult. Okay, so as soon as you clear out the area, grab one of these javelins, and you can basically just get to work right away. You can start clearing out these helicopters, and then you can start clearing out the tanks that are on the street. Alright, so you'll see 2, maybe 3 tanks. For the time being, you shouldn't really be getting shot at. This part is pretty simple. Now notice right there another audio cue. Foley said to look towards the southwest. And you're going to see through the thermal scope all of these enemies running across the field. They're going to have javelins of their own. If I could hit a damn target, then I might be able to show you what you're actually supposed to do, and that is kill those enemies. Alright, so basically just do exactly that. Just stay here, kill the enemies. You're basically just trying to buy the guys on the ground some time. Now this was a bit premature. Essentially what's going to happen is as you're doing this, enemies are going to try to sneak up on you. So I was kind of anticipating that, but a bit too early. Now here, for some reason, I just couldn't see the enemy, but finally I found him. I think the game just got a little stuck here. Alright, there we go. You basically just got to kill enough of these guys to trigger the end of the sequence. So there we go. Objective complete. Alright, so as soon as you're done, exit the sniper rifle, turn around, and you kill all of these enemies that are trying to sneak up on you. Alright, and then once you're done killing those enemies, turn back around and just start killing some of the helicopters with the javelin. And that'll finish the objective. Now for some reason it's only one, but one of these helicopters is gonna just like be fixated on you. Like whereas the rest of them are kind of just doing their own thing. This one here just does not want to leave you be. But this is, again, you don't have to kill all the helicopters. You just got to kind of kill enough of them to trigger the end of the objective. Alright, so now we are going to have a brief little timed sequence. Really nothing to worry about here. They give you way more time than you need to. There's actually only one enemy you got to worry about. So climb the stairs here. Out of this door is going to come an enemy. Kill him. And then just keep going up the stairs. Or I'm sorry, turn around and go on this balcony here. But the point is, that's the only enemy you actually have to worry about, and then you basically just make a run for it. Super simple. And you can, I mean, it only took 30 seconds, and you had a minute and 30 seconds, so I don't really know why they gave you that much time. Alright guys, so now you're gonna hop into the gun seat of the chopper, and this is the last part of Act 2, but it's also something you have to be pretty careful with, because as you're up here, it can be really hard to actually determine which enemies are enemies and which people are actually teammates. And if you start firing on teammates, you're going to get accused of friendly fire, and it's going to cut your run, and it's going to treat it like a death, in which case you got to do this level all over again. So I'm going to show you exactly what you can shoot. So we come over here to this, like, to the monuments, and you'll see these RPG enemies on top of those square towers. So any enemies in this courtyard here, you can shoot. You can see there's a lot of trucks and fuel tanks and enemies on the towers. Anything here you can feel free to shoot. And actually, obviously, you should shoot, otherwise you're probably going to get killed. And then outside of the courtyard, you'll see this big street with some cars. Start firing on the street. Alright, so you can see all the enemies down there. But, I mean, honestly, you can't really tell that they're enemies. You just have to know. So, be careful. Alright, then, again, firing on the courtyard some more. Alright, you're going to see enemies in the windows here firing RPGs. Kill them. Not too difficult. And then on the rooftop, you'll see some more enemies. And then eventually you'll get a little scripted event like this, where your helicopter's going to go down no matter what. Don't worry, you didn't die. This is all scripted. And we're basically coming to the end of Act 2. You're going to have this final little showdown on the street, and then the screen is going to go to white, and that will trigger the end. So guys, I want to thank you for watching. Hopefully you found this either helpful or entertaining, or both. As always, let me know what you thought in the comments down below. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to the channel for a lot of different helpful videos like this. I also plan on covering this game on Veteran, so if you think that's something you want to see, feel free to subscribe, leave a comment. Again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.